Good afternoon. It is 1 p.m. here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and this is The Ambassador. With me, your Ambassador Paul Mathenge, and this is where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Now to our first story. The Big Tech Africa Forum has kicked off in Tunisia, drawing more than 100 startups from across the continent as organizers set their sights on making it one of Africa's leading technology events. Here is more on the story.
The forum brought together entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, and innovators in Tunis, providing a platform to showcase emerging solutions in fintech, e-commerce, renewable energy, health, and artificial intelligence. Delegates engaged in networking sessions, pitch competitions, and panel discussions centered on digital transformation and the role of Africa's youth in shaping the global tech landscape. Organizers highlighted that Tunisia was chosen as host for its growing reputation as a North African innovation hub, supported by government incentives and a thriving startup ecosystem. The event also created space for knowledge exchange between Francophone and Anglophone tech players, bridging regional divides and opening doors for cross-border collaboration.
We are a startup, so these events are very important to us. This soft networking can help you in the tasks you're working on, basically, and also allows you to expand your working group and be accepted more easily. That's why we must always visit these events and communicate with people and organizers.
Africa's tech sector has been experiencing rapid growth, with record investments flowing into startups in Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, and South Africa in the recent years. However, smaller ecosystems, including Tunisia, have been pushing to attract attention and investments through platforms like this forum. Previous editions of the forum were smaller in scale, but this year's turnout marks a significant step towards positioning the event as a continental fixture.
Today we came here to get to know companies. We like to get to know startups. We like to do networking, and this is a good thing for us. We introduce them to our product, and in this way we exchange information and communicate with each other.
Organizers expressed optimism that the Big Tech Africa Forum will expand further in the coming years, aspiring to rival global tech gatherings. Startups participating in this year's edition hope the exposure will unlock funding opportunities, partnerships, and mentorship that could propel them onto the international stage. Tunisia, meanwhile, is banking on the forum to cement its role as a bridge between Africa, Europe, and the Middle East in digital innovation. Molin Rono for GBS News.
And now moving on, Africa must not only adapt, it must lead. That was the message from UN Global Compact Chief Sanda Ojambo ahead of the 2025 Unstoppable Africa Summit in New York. The event, hosted by the United Nations and African Union, will bring together heads of state, CEOs, and creatives to chart Africa's role in shaping global markets, with themes ranging from trade and digital innovation to creative industries. The summit aims at redefining how the world does business with Africa. Here is more.
The United Nations is calling for a shift in how the world engages with Africa. The summit, set for September 21st to September 22nd in New York, will convene leaders from government, businesses, and civil society to develop framework for Africa's economic transformation.
Africa must not only adapt, it has to lead. And that's why the Global Africa Business Initiative exists. Launched in 2022 with a clear goal, as I said, to change how the world views Africa and does business with Africa.
Ojiambo emphasized the resilience of Africa's private sector, noting that even in conflict zone, businesses continue to operate and support communities. She said government must ensure peace and stability to unlock further investment.
What we want to, highlight with Unstoppable Africa is the fact that the private sector continues to remain robust. Even where there is conflict and strife, business will still continue. Every day in your reporting, you tell the story of Africa's challenges. There's also a story of Africa's progress that you tell. We want to elevate that and amplify that It's a story of innovation, resilience, and ambition. And I think, one of the strongest messages that we hear from African private sector leaders is African political leaders is oftentimes the private sector exists and continues to help almost de-risk, provide an environment of safety, calling for investment, and also just demonstrating that people will still need the goods and the services that are provided.
Since its launch in 2022, the Global African Business Initiative has brought together thousands of stakeholders, including 10 heads of state and over 8,000 participants. The 2025 edition will be co-hosted by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and African Union Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf. Organizers says African youth, resources and creativity positions the continent as a global engine for growth. Reporting for GBS TV, I'm Ibrahim Said.
And now moving on. Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo are on the rise as health authorities race against time to contain the spread of the deadly virus in affected region. The Ministry of Health confirmed that new infections have been detected in parts of North Kivu province, sparking renewed fears of a wider outbreak. Medical teams, supported by the World Health Organization and humanitarian partners, have been deployed to conduct contact tracing, provide vaccinations, and set up isolation units for patients. Authorities said that previous outbreaks had highlighted both the fragility of the health system and the resilience of local communities, with lessons learned now being applied to curb the current crisis. Despite these efforts, challenges such as poor infrastructure, limited medical supplies, and mistrust among communities have complicated the response. The ambassador will take a short break. We will be right back with more as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Stay tuned.
You'll realize that the way a man thinks, so they behave.
Interesting.
Actually, I saw a researcher saying that the population in Kenya, about 70% are below 35. Leadership should be light. It should be that which helps people to see and solve their problems. Yes. I believe a good leader is not a leader that brings excuses at the table. Is a leader that says, okay, we have this problem. How do we solve it?
How do you strike that balance by ensuring these leaders can be able to call shots, but their shots are justified? No one is going to complain. In the sense of, if this person A is making decisions, even if I'm not around, I'll agree to what they say.
Okay.
So today we're diving into a topic that has become rather popular right here in Kenya, the K-pop culture.
I would say K-pop invokes creativity, like mega creativity. I have friends who are creative and you see you've done that and they're like, yeah. An ex told me that K-pop girls, K-pop stan girls, who's like, the men you stan look like women, and you aim to get a man that looks like that. So if you fail to find a man like that, because obviously you're in Kenya, you're not going to find a pretty man. For me, it's like I have two personalities at this point. I have my normal life and I have my army life. Because when I get into my army life, it's just like a whole new world. A community full of people who don't judge, people who accept you. Learning Korean from a Kenyan can sometimes mess you up. They pronounce words differently, and when you speak to a native, it's like, hold up, what did you say? I've never met like a K-pop fan. I don't know why. What am I?
No,
Not when people want to like express themselves like
I'm a K-pop fan. Unless you see them like wearing like a branded t-shirt or a branded hoodie, you realize that they're K-pop fans.
The main campaign of BTS is loving yourself, right? And K-pop has a lot of drawbacks, just like anything else. Too much of something is poisonous, yeah? And one of the drawbacks is it comes with beauty, because they have these absurd beauty standards. Well, BTS passed this message that you're supposed to love yourself, embrace yourself. You're just perfect the way you are. You don't have to eat less to be beautiful. You're beautiful from the inside, right? Getting to BTS, it's hard to come out.
Okay.
Where does today come before yesterday? Kumbuka majibu fupi pale kwa SMS line at 21144.
Art should be a mirror. It should mirror things that people are going through, both the ones that are spoken and the unspoken.
What's the difference between film and theater?
Film and theater.
If you had to write an entire story without either action or dialogue, which will you choose?
Wacheni could treat film and theater kama entertainment. Yeah. So film and theater is a very strong tool.
How do you think art is related to film and theater?
Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I stay. Where you move, I move. I will follow you.
Welcome to our Bible story.
Are you ready? Great! Today we are going to learn about a story about a widow of Zarephath. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live.
Before I conclude, I would like us to read and see what is the will of the Father towards each and every one of us. Children, as you listen to that story, what have you been able to learn? And remember, this is Kids Mind, the Bible story. And as usual, this is where we learn, we laugh, and we explore.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back to The Ambassador as we break down the developments news for you and get the bigger picture on what's happening globally. And now moving on, the Hilton Hotel was still in flames till this morning as carcasses of government building kept their innards exposed. The few motorcycles and cars that dared to break a curfew had to navigate a series of checkpoints patrolled by soldiers, their fingers on the triggers of their rifles. This is after a youth-led group rioted against the current regime, and the riots have led to a total destruction of the state, destabilizing businesses and movement. Davis Karani now reports on the state of this country's capital.
Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, is normally a city of noise and commerce, where God surveyed the jammed traffic from brightly lit roadside temples. On Thursday, soon after the clashes between the security forces and the protesters claimed at least 37 lives and ripped the institutional heart out of the city, much of Kathmandu was swaddled in suspense and silence. Nepal is now a country without a functioning government. No one seems to know where the president is. The prime minister has resigned. The army is talking with the young protesters who are known as the Gen Z and have proposed to Sheila Kaki, a former chief justice, to step in as the interim leader of the country. They say that she could be sworn in today, but it isn't clear on who has the legitimate power to appoint her and what kind of government she could even assemble.
A lot of people expressed the sentiment that yes, perhaps this needed to happen. You know, perhaps there needed to be an extreme kind of protest that would change the very face of Nepal. Because unless that happened, the old guard, the old politicians, the old leaders would find a way to keep holding on to power.
केही न केही त गडबडी होला नि त अनि पुरा त्यो निस्किरहेको छ नि सबै कुराहरू सोसियल मिडियामा निस्किन्छ क्या एउटा न एउटा मान्छेले समाउँछ अनि त्यो चिज दुनियाँले देख्छ अनि त्यो दुनियाँले आवाज उठाउँछ त्यो चाहिँ नउठाओस् भनेर सायद सोसियल मिडिया बन्द गरेको होला
20 दशक भन्दा बेसी हो करप्सन हामी एभ्री मान्छेको गल्लीमा आज फ्रस्ट्रेसन छ क्या स्ट्रेस छ मान्छेले एभ्री आफ्नो गल्लीबाट घरबाट यति तनाव लिएर आएको छ 2 दशक भन्दा बेसी भयो र यो चोरहरूले हामीलाई बारम्बार यति दुःख दिएको छ यो त एउटा सानो झिल्को मात्र जुन सोशल मिडियाको कुराले गर्दा आयो
With institutions burned to the ground and the army in control, Gen Z protesters are pushing anti-corruption crusader to be appointed as the country's interim leader. Soldiers tirelessly worked to douse a fire at the Hilton Hotel, which began burning in Kathmandu, Nepal earlier this week.
Important thing right now is to find a way to come together for Gen Z and this whole movement to come together and decide on a way forward that is acceptable to them and not allow their movement to be hijacked by opportunists who are just waiting in the shadows for that moment.
The city is now under the control of the army and everything is in a standstill and the fate of this nation lies in a limbo. Davis Karani for GBS News.
And now to a developing news about Charlie Kirk assassination. Police in Utah have released new videos and images of a person of interest in a killing of Charlie Kirk, a conservative American activist and ally of U.S. President Donald Trump. Kirk was speaking at a debate at Utah Valley University when authorities say a shooter fired a single round from a rooftop, fatally striking him in the neck in an apparent targeted assassination. There was initial confusion over the manhunt for Kirk's killer, with FBI Director Kash Patel posting that the subject had been detained before walking back the statement an hour later. Trump, who blamed Kirk's killing on members of the radical left and threatened punitive measures against political opponents, have called on his supporters to remain nonviolent. Let's have a look. Video footage shows a person on a roof on a building adjacent to the field where the meeting was taking place. It's a distance of some 130 meters from the rooftop to where Charlie Kirk was struck by a single shot.
Great. This morning I can tell you that we have recovered what we believe is the weapon that was used in yesterday's shooting. It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle. That rifle was recovered in a wooded area where the shooter had fled.
The FBI released photographs of a young man identified as a person of interest in the investigation, matching an area agency characterization of a suspect who blinded into the student community. The investigation continues as the U.S. commemorates the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. While visiting the Pentagon, President Trump eulogized Kirk, who had been an influential supporter and a friend.
We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Condemnation of the attack comes from across the political spectrum.
Violence, which affects so many different people of so many different political persuasions, is an affliction of America. And coming together is what we ought to be doing, not pointing fingers of blame.
However, on social media, hours after the shooting, President Donald Trump released a message blaming the killing on what he called a radical left, this before any motive has been established. Charlie Kirk's casket arrived in his home state on Arizona aboard Air Force 2 on Thursday as Vice President J.D. Vance honored the conservative activist with a final flight. Vance's wife, Usha, stepped off the plane with Kirk's widow, Erica. The vice president was a few steps behind in a dark suit Air Force 2 arrived in Phoenix after a short flight from Salt Lake City, about 64 kilometers from Orem, Utah, where Kirk was assassinated while speaking at Utah Valley University. Vance helped carry Kirk's casket with a group of ununiformed service members as it was loaded onto the plane. On Wednesday night, Vance wrote on social media that his relationship with Kirk began several years ago after he appeared on Tucker Carlson's show. Kirk reached out to compliment him, and that moment of kindness began a friendship. Last year, Kirk advocated for Vance to be Donald Trump's choice for vice president and frequently checked in on his family. Vance described him as a true friend. Kirk was a co-founder and CEO of the conservative youth organization Turning Point USA, based in Phoenix. Now moving on, United Nations Human Rights Office has published a report on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, which is a follow-up to the 2014 report by the UN Commission of Inquiry into the Human Rights Situation in the DPRK. James Henan, UN Human Rights Representative in Seoul, Korea, said, and I quote, "The report concludes that overall the situation has certainly not improved since 2014. Despite these isolated areas of sub-improvement, but overall has remained the same or in many areas degraded. One of the key concerns for the US and the UN Human Rights Office is the increase of executions and the increase in the number of crimes that attract the death penalties." Let's have a look.
Well, the conclusion of the report is that overall the situation has certainly not improved since 2014, despite these isolated areas of some improvement, but overall has remained the same or in many areas degraded. Of key concern for us in the UN Human Rights Office is the increase in executions and the increase in the number of crimes that attract the death penalty. You can now be not just jailed for watching foreign media, but you can in some cases be executed for watching and distributing it. We're concerned about the ongoing existence of political prison camps, which have been there for many, many decades. Those institutions are a total anomaly in 2025, and the report calls for those prison camps to be closed. We are concerned about the ongoing situation of enforced disappearance. DPRK is responsible for the forced disappearance of, as we estimate, about 100,000 people, including Korean citizens and also foreign nationals, notably from Japan. For this report, we've interviewed almost 400 who have escaped in the last 10-year period. It's a very mixed group of people. Some people, many people, escape for purely economic reasons. They are looking to support themselves and their families. They're looking to escape ongoing hunger and lack of opportunities. Others, at the other end of the scale, we have fairly high-level defectors, often diplomats and senior officials who have been abroad and who have decided to defect while abroad. And they bring a very different perspective, and they come for different reasons. We have another group who are people who are...
And now from Brazil, in a landmark ruling, Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to over 27 years in prison after being found guilty of leading a military coup attempt. The Supreme Court also barred him from running for office until 2033, a verdict that has sparked widespread reactions within, inside Brazil and abroad. Let's have a look.
Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to 27 years and 3 months in prison after being found guilty of plotting a military coup to overturn the 2022 election results.
Para o réu Jair Messias Bolsonaro em 27 anos e 3 meses, sendo 24 anos e 9 meses de reclusão e 2 anos e 6 meses de detenção, além de 124 dias multa.
The dramatic ruling came from a panel of 5 justices on Brazil's Supreme Court.
4 voted to convict Bolsonaro of leading a coordinated attempt to cling to power after losing to President Luiz. His lawyers have slammed the sentence as excessive and confirmed plans to appeal.
A court of exception in international courts is interpreted as a violation of human rights, something that's been acknowledged, including by nations outside Brazil.
The court also ruled that the 70-year-old is barred from holding public office until 2033. For now, Bolsonaro remains under house arrest, but if the sentence stands, it could mean spending the rest of his life in prison. Bolsonaro supporters aren't backing down. Over the weekend, an estimated 40,000 protesters gathered in Brasilia, claiming the trial was politically motivated. 7 others were also convicted, including top military officials, cabinet ministers, and Bolsonaro's closest aides.
E acho, e já antecipo, que para mim fez prova cabal de que grupo liderado por Jair Messias Bolsonaro, composto por figuras chaves do governo, das Forças Armadas e de órgãos de inteligência, desenvolveu e implementou plano progressivo e sistemático de ataque às instituições democráticas, com a finalidade de prejudicar a alternância legítima de poder nas eleições de 2022, minar o livre exercício dos demais poderes constitucionais, especialmente do poder judiciário.
Prosecutors say the plot ultimately led to the January 8, 2023 storming of Brazil's Congress, Supreme Court, and Presidential Palace. International reaction has been swift and polarizing. U.S. President Donald Trump condemned the trial and imposed tariffs on Brazilian goods.
Well, I watched that trial. I know him pretty well. Foreign leader. I thought he was a good president of Brazil. And it's very surprising that that could happen. That's very much like they tried to do with me, but they didn't get away with it at all.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the verdict unjust, prompting Brazil's foreign ministry to condemn the comments as intimidation. Despite being barred from office until 2030 over previous election violation, Bolsonaro insists he still intends to run in Brazil's 2026 presidential race. Susan Nganga, GBS News.
And now, as Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, being sentenced to 27 years in prison, that story brings us to the end of today's edition. I am your ambassador, Paul Madenge, and this has been the Ambassador 1 p.m. on GBS TV Africa. Stay with us for continuous updates throughout the day, and be sure to join me every Thursday and Friday as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Thank you for your time and company. Until next time, goodbye.
Everywhere, GBS. Everywhere, GBS.